Hi, I'm Susan Kennard and welcome to The Spiritual Awakener. This is a podcast where you are going to hear incredible stories of everyday people like you and I who have had turning points or spiritual awakenings in their life that's led them to realize that they were so much more than this mind and this body. They were so much more than who they thought they were originally. So, welcome to The Spiritual Awakener, where I'm interviewing somebody very interesting called Sarah Drage. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to The Spiritual Awakener.
Hi, thanks for having me, Susan.
How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Good, fantastic. Yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day here in the UK and the South Coast. So we've got nothing to complain about, have we?
No, not at all, not at all.
So, Sarah, what would you say was the turning point or the spiritual awakening that you experienced, which led you to be of service?
My dad's death, sadly. Such a tragic and negative experience opened my eyes and made me deviate away from this line that society is in and just become aware and awakened. So I lost my dad in 2017 to alcoholism. And it was awful. It was such an awful experience. He had depression, he had anxiety, he had PTSD, and he drank to numb those emotions. And one day he had too much, and it killed him within 30 hours of admission to hospital. So yeah, it was, sorry, I do get a bit emotional talking about it. It's a bit of a
there are going to be lots of people, this is going to really help a lot of people because they can relate to situations like this. And quite often in as you know, I'm a specialist in trauma, and what I find when I work with people that have experienced things like this is it's a massive, amazing experience afterwards, because that turning point or that spiritual awakening experience leads you to be a much more shining star than perhaps you would have been, and for those of you listening, my spiritual awakening is on episode 1, where a very good friend of mine took his life. So we have many experiences that have led us to expand our consciousness. So if you're okay to carry on, I'm sure this will really help a lot of people.
So I think my turning point was, well, I didn't realize at first when it was all unfolding, and it was only a few weeks after his death, and I'll get onto it in a little while, but something strange happened which kind of put everything into perspective and made me realize, oh well, that happened and this happened, and what does this mean? So basically the day before he died, I was on my way to work, and I was a total skeptic before. I want to put that out there. This spirituality and afterlife would not have crossed my mind. Like the thought of, at that point in my life, me seeing a medium or discussing anything spiritual would have been just not me. I've got a bachelor's degree in science, so I'm very scientifically minded.
Same.
So
being the
all of that
scientist.
It was just completely unheard of for me to think that way. But that morning my dad was admitted into hospital, I got a phone call from my sister, but about 5 minutes before I got that phone call, I had this premonition. I had this image in my head that just came to me, and it was me speaking my dad's eulogy at his funeral at the crematorium. And it was eerie, it was strange, it was just a real, I can't describe it. It was just like a certain feeling that was going to happen,
like it was,
and it hit me
real, like, you know, because you know, like when I had the visitation of Martin that came to me, it was like, you're there, it's real, but it doesn't feel real as well, you know? Was it kind of like that?
absolutely
Yeah,
that
the rational
definitely
mind cannot kind of comprehend it in that moment, right?
Yes, yeah. It felt like it felt all the feelings in my body. It felt like it was real, like it was going to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
But I couldn't admit that. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
So I had this premonition. I was reading his eulogy. I was at the crematorium,
Wow.
and about 10 minutes later, I got a phone call from my sister, and she said, "You need to get up to the hospital. Dad's in a bad way." And it still didn't click at that point. I was in shock. I thought, right, we've got to get up there. I've got to go and see him. And the day unfolded quite quickly, actually. We ended up going from A&E into majors, into resus, onto a ward, and then eventually into intensive care. And there was another point that same day, got to about 5 o'clock, and I had another premonition. And it was just this feeling of the future, that he wasn't going to be in it, but I didn't understand that. I was feeling that he was going to die. I still couldn't admit at that point that we're going to lose him. I was so it's such a hard feeling to describe, but I knew that he wasn't going to be in my future, and it was a real, it hit me. It was a bit like a car crash. It was just he's not going to be here.
Inner knowing, but you didn't have that, like, that brain knowing.
No, I didn't. It's like, it was a very surreal feeling, and I couldn't quite understand what was happening. And even at that point, I was so convinced he was going to make it through, despite having 3 surgeons in front of us telling us that his lungs are filled with fluid, and he needs dialysis, he needs a blood transfusion. And at that point, I still couldn't understand that we could possibly lose him. I just thought he's going to be in intensive care for a week. He's going to come out, and he's going to realise, I'm never going to do this again.
That might have been his spiritual awakening, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I was really positive, like rationally, but deep down in my core, I knew that I was seeing a future without my dad in it. And that's the only way I can describe it, almost like I got a whole glimpse of my future and he wasn't there.
And some people say, you know, when they are having a near-death experience, you know, I've spoken to some people about that, they have sort of almost like a flash of their life. But in a way, you had not your own near-death experience, but you had your dad's near-death experience before he actually passed over. So you had that kind of, like vision, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Course, being a scientist, like, and I'm with you on that one, because that was my background. You know, you would have really, that would have been such a turning point for you, because that is literally like changing a religion, isn't it? You know, to someone, change your religion, that's like the whole of your belief system gone, isn't it, in one go?
Oh, definitely.
To do what you experienced.
It was, and even at that point, I still didn't understand it. That wasn't even my turning point. I had those feelings, and I can look back now and I can think that meant something. I understand it now, but they were significant enough to stop me in my tracks and think, oh, this is a really surreal feeling. This is strange. And it weren't until a couple of weeks later that I really started to understand it a little bit more, and started exploring that feeling a little bit more. And that really happened. So we lost my dad the following day, intensive care in the evening. We were told that there was a 15% chance of survival. And I went and I told him everything I wanted to say to him. We switched off his life support, and that was it. And it was a week later, and we were at his house, and at the time, my eldest was 5, and my youngest was 2, and she started screaming, and she could which is really unlike her. So this was not like her at all. She was 2, she could talk quite well, but she weren't at that age where she'd make things up to the extreme that she did.
They get a bit older when they do that, aren't they? They're a bit older when they fantasize.
She didn't really understand what was happening. So she started screaming, and she could see something. So my husband's run around the house thinking, well, there's an intruder, there's somebody in here. So he's looking everywhere, and she kept saying to me, there's a big person upstairs, there's a big person. So I picked her up, and I went to go up the stairs, and she just went absolutely crazy. She didn't want to go up there. She was adamant she could see this big person. So the following day, we're back home, and I'm in my bedroom mooching around, and she saw a picture of my dad when he was younger. And she just went to me, oh, that was big person at Nana's house. And at that point I thought, what, that is really, that is so, why would she say that? Why would her little 2-year-old brain?
Exactly.
How? So at that point I thought, right, okay, there's something going on, right? There's something, absolutely. So then I started researching, and I started.
Children are definitely nearer to source.
And my youngest is, I've been told, she's an old soul. She's a spiritual person. She's seen him a couple of times. She's talked about previous life experiences. So she, again, that same month. That same month. Absolutely. But she's told me before about her grandma from London. She doesn't have a grandma from London, not in this life. And she said that the grandma from London, when she died and went to heaven, that Sarah and Reese would be our new mummy and daddy, which is me and my husband. And that and I said, you don't have a grandma from London? She said, no, I do, mummy. The planes came, they dropped fireworks in my house, and then my grandma sent me to live with another family. And I thought, my God, but she was consistent. No, exactly. not at all.
Even, you wouldn't have learned that in history.
No, and she was consistent with that story all the way. Like, I must admit, like, now it started to, I don't know if because she's becoming older, she's nearly 5 now, so she doesn't talk about it so much, but I would say for a good 2 years she was pretty consistent and adamant that she had a grandma from London, and that story never deviated. It was always the same story. So again, that was another thing to add to my list.
I just want to say, Sarah, for anyone listening that has a child that is showing those kind of conversations, please don't dismiss it. My daughter, I'm a medium, as you know, and my daughter, I have a daughter and a son, and my daughter Sarah saw spirit from a very, very early age, and actually she doesn't want to see them now. She's chosen, she's 12, and she's chosen not to see them, only if I'm around. She's fine if mummy's around, but she doesn't want to see them. She doesn't want to see them because they used to visit her at night, and she's like, I don't want that. But what I would say to anyone listening, don't dismiss your children, because your children probably know so much more than you ever know about source, about spirit, about guides, about angels. And if you dismiss it, what happens is that they start to question their own self-worth and their own beliefs. And so we want to open that up for children, don't we, Sarah?
Absolutely. And I listened. I never prompted her to say anything, but I never dismissed it as though it weren't real. So I'd talk about it, and she'd tell me, and I'd listen, and it fascinated me. It really fascinated me. So then I added that to my list. I had like this compiled list of evidence in my head that I was collecting, which made me think, okay, so that was strange. This can't be a coincidence, surely. So that got me onto past life experiences and reincarnation, and then I got onto so many YouTube videos on near-death experiences. I was obsessed. I was so fascinated, and my theory was I couldn't, and I still can't get it out of my head, that all these doctors, science-minded people that fob these off as hallucinations. And my theory is, how can millions of people hallucinate exactly the same thing? Like, it doesn't happen.
Or similar things.
Yeah.
There's nuance to it. Like, for me, I was completely could not move. I wasn't near death, but I couldn't move in my bed. And someone walked into the room with their dog and actually tried to wake me up. And I know it was Martin later on. I knew Martin, the guy that died, that took his life. But you can't make that up.
No,
that isn't something you make up. And some people see themselves sleeping, you know. Their spirit is what, you know, is seeing themselves in their physical form. This happens all the time, you know. People, you can't, it's not something that isn't happening, is it?
No, absolutely not.
So
Definitely
I agree with you. Yeah.
And that was mind blowing for me. So at that point, I thought, my goodness, like there's definitely something. All these people can't go through those experiences, and you don't hallucinate the same thing as everybody else. And to top it all off, everybody that was going or having their near-death experience, the majority of the time they'd be seeing deceased loved ones, which again made me think, it's always a loved one that you're seeing that's on the other side. So I couldn't, it was just mind-blowing, honestly. I was so fascinated by it, and it brought a lot of comfort to me, because I thought, I'm going to see my dad again, and I'll get to talk to him again, because that part of the grief for me, that I struggled with the whole, and I think everybody does that. I'll never see him again, I'll never talk to him again, I'll never be able to get advice from him.
And so this is great, because at the moment, I know we spoke a bit before we went on live, and what we were saying about what's happening at the moment in the world, with this new world awakening, you know, there are a lot of people that are dying or passing over, we would like to say, to the other side. And so anyone listening that may have lost a loved one at the time of this virus that's going around, just to say that you will meet them again. You will meet them again, and it is just like a doorway. And when I see clairvoyantly as a medium, it's almost like they are here with you, and it's literally just a doorway. So it's a really great thing that you're talking about this now, and
it's so comforting, and it, not just that, but it made my fear of death lessen. So for myself, it's not so much, obviously I still have that like uncontrollable fear for my children and my husband and my loved ones.
That's the only
thing. Myself,
that's the only thing. Like, so it's like you don't have the fear of actually passing over, but obviously when you have children and you have loved ones, you wouldn't want to think of them from a human perspective of not having you or you not having them. But that's the human perspective, isn't it? Which everyone is going to feel.
Yes, I think it's just natural, isn't it? So I was mind blown by that, and then so I've added that to my list of evidence again, and then it got me thinking about the whole experience before my dad passed away, and things that my dad was saying. At the time, we didn't realise he was dying, and he rang me a few days before he passed away, and I think he rang me and told me he was hallucinating. And I thought it was the drink. I thought, right, okay, you've had too much to drink. And he said, no, I keep seeing my dad. So his dad, my granddad, had passed away 4 months prior to him. So my dad, he'd done so well. He was sober for 18 months, and then his dad died, and it was just a tipping point for him. So he started drinking again. But in that 18 months, I developed such a strong bond. Was close anyway, but it intensified it more. So he kept seeing his dad. He kept saying, I could see these visions of my dad coming to me. He's in my bedroom, and I me being a skeptic at that point, not understanding what that meant, put it down to the drink and him hallucinating. But now I look back at that and I think he was coming to collect him. That was my dad's deathbed vision. I look at that now, and if another family member said that to me now, who I knew was ill, I think, okay, it's coming, it's coming, the time's coming, it's getting closer. And I've seen 3 mediums that have told me that my granddad came to collect my dad. And the stranger thing is, it is enough, but even more validation is that my granddad's wife saw a medium, and she lives about 300 miles away from me, so there's no connection like with mediums. And the medium that she spoke to told her that her husband, my granddad, collected his son around a hospital bed. And at that point I thought, right, okay, there is 100%, there is something to this. This isn't a coincidence. This is not a coincidence. This is now, to me, this was like factual. This was right. This is happening. So then it just obviously it snowballed my whole spiritual education and me researching, just
awakening.
Snowballed. Absolutely. And I had to, me being me, I had to have scientific validation and look at the science side. So I'm looking into it all, and I'm looking at what I've forgotten the name. It's the deaf is an illusion. It's a biocentrism, looking at all of that and looking at what Sigmund Freud believed in, Albert Einstein, and then I thought, well, if these scientific people had some kind of explanation, then surely there's something more to this. So and then, but it also, what it really did for me, and which I'd be forever grateful, and I know that if my dad, which my dad will know, and I know that he would die 10 times over knowing that by just his death has helped me deal so much better with my own anxiety. So I have generalized anxiety disorder. I've had it, I think I've probably had it most of my life, but it's just been more prevalent since the birth of my youngest daughter, and it's been debilitating. And I've cried so many times on my dad's shoulder, and I watched the pain in his eyes seeing his daughter go through that. And I know that if he knew that it took his death to spiritually awaken me to become less fearful of my own death, he would have died 10 times over. And I know that. And
was he always an alcoholic? Was he always somebody who
No, he went through something very traumatic, and he was never violent or aggressive. He was so meek and mild and sensitive. He was the kind of man that would cry at the news. He would turn the news off if there was anything to do with children. He couldn't watch it. He was such a sensitive man, and I think that sometimes can be a blessing but also a curse to be that sensitive, because you absorb everything. He was just so empathetic, and what
happened, Sarah, after all this then? So you had your spiritual awakening, and then what happened after that? How did your life change?
So I became so much more open-minded, and then I became more open-minded with everything, really, like the way, like analysing the way people behave the way they did, and sometimes understanding that, well, if somebody's anxious or depressed, or they're behaving this way, what have they gone through to lead them onto that journey? Why are they like that?
It's not just from this
so
life, Sarah, is it? What's going on in the world at the moment with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Pluto's very much about all your past lives coming up to be healed, so from an astrological perspective. So, there's a lot of that going on at the moment, and we bring that in. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that anything difficult happened in someone's childhood, which is what we used to believe, in psychotherapy and psychology. We used to believe that. And possibly there's a trigger, but it doesn't have to be, does it? It can come from...
No, not at all. But so I just became more accepting and open-minded, more present, and I could deal with my own mental health a lot better, and the fear of death lessened, the fear of the unknown lessened. So I set up a Facebook group between family and friends, and it was intended to be a safe place for just between family and friends to talk about our mental health. And so I wanted to talk about people's negative experiences, but what positives they've taken from it. So I always like to believe, or I do believe, that my dad's death wasn't in vain. He's not just another statistic, that his death has had a positive impact on my life. Absolutely. And has helped other people. So I wanted to share this with people. I wanted to say to people that, look, I've had anxiety, I've had PTSD, and I've gone through this. I've watched my dad succumb to alcoholism and die from it. But look at the positives I've taken from this. I've become open-minded, I've become spiritual, I've become more positive. So, and I wanted other people to know that you can take a positive out of a rubbish situation. Yeah. So I set up this group and we shared stories of our mental health. And the whole point was to get the conversation flowing, to normalise it, free of stigma, free of judgment.
Get talking.
Yeah. And it took off. And one morning I woke up and there were hundreds of people requesting to join that I didn't know. Yeah. So now there are over 2,000 people on my women's group, and 200 of them are my friends.
What's it called? What's it called?
It's called so we're called Warrior Kind.
Warrior,
so we've got Warrior Kind. Warrior Kind.
Okay.
Yeah, and the purpose of the organisation now, so we've actually expanded. So I've gone into partnership with a production team, and we are trying to we're putting on this massive campaign about normalising healthy discussion, but getting real people to actually talk about what they've been through. Which is really powerful because it creates a ripple effect. So once one person opens up, then another person relates, and it's so powerful. It's quite beautiful, actually.
I wanted you on my show. Well, you were drawn to connect with me about my show.
Definitely. So yeah, and it people relate, and the more people that relate, the more people feel comfortable to open up about their own mental health.
Absolutely.
So I saw something in this and I thought, right, okay, so this needs to go further. Like, this is helping people. It is literally, I can go as far as saying it's saved people. It's saved people's lives.
Absolutely.
I've had people tell me that the group, just reading other people's experiences, has prompted them to go and get the help they needed.
And more than ever now, because we are isolated, like physically, where the government has put an isolation on us, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So more and more people are turning to podcasts, they're turning to Facebook, they're turning to collect with groups that they can, essentially, they would have been perhaps gone out for a coffee with. Now they can't go out for a coffee, they can come to a group and they can really share in a safe space. Yeah, that's what I love about this. And so people can go and try and request to come in your group. Have you got space?
So we've so part of the expansion, we've actually just built a website. Brilliant. So part of what we're going to be doing is Warrior Kind, so it's inclusive of everyone. So going forward, I realized that I wanted to make it bigger than just a Facebook group. Not that it's not just a Facebook group, but I wanted it to be more accessible. I wanted it to be accessible for everyone. So we sat down as a team and we created this business plan so we could go move it forward. And so we're a not-for-profit community interest company, and all the profits that we'll generate from the business plan. So we've got a wellbeing directory, so we'll check and approve wellbeing practitioners. So we'll check their insurance, check their reviews, and we'll give them the Warrior Kind badge of approval, and they'll pay an annual subscription to sign up to the website. So we can recommend to our members these people. We've approved these wellbeing practitioners. And with the profits that we raise, so we've got that going. We've got a YouTube channel, so we're going to bring people into a studio that we've got, that we're going to interview people and talk about their experiences. We've got an online magazine and a printed magazine coming. We've got merchandise with our logos, and all the profits that we make will fund people through the right treatment they need. So some people, because I think the NHS is so strapped and so pressured that it's just where I think we're dealing with a mental health pandemic as well as a virus pandemic.
The thing
and I
is,
think
people are always looking outside of themselves to find somebody to fix them, and really we need to be looking at what, like you're doing, is building this community where people are able to talk and they're able to say, oh my goodness, I'm not weird, I'm not alone, I've had these experiences. And yes, it might be helpful. Obviously I'm a specialist in trauma, so I have a lot of clients that way, but it's helpful to really work with somebody that way that's a specialist. But it doesn't mean that you have to go to somebody outside of you all of the time. Sometimes it's really good to talk to people like you, you know, people that have experienced these things, and listen to podcasts as well, where people can say, oh my goodness, I'm not on my own with this. Because being on your own with anything makes it much bigger, doesn't it?
Massively, because you internalize a lot of things, and once you internalize everything, it seems worse than what it is. But when you offload and you talk about it, you think, oh, that I feel a lot better for doing that. It's like that advert where she unzips her chest and all these words come out, and I relate so much to that, because I think that is exactly what it is. Whenever I feel really anxious.
Your book then, Sarah? When are you birthing your book?
that is on my bucket list.
I know, but I remember I'm a medium as well. I'm psychically being told to say that to you. So I think that will really help people as well, is to you know, my book's with an editor at the moment, and I'll tell you about the editor once you're ready, because she's amazing and local to us actually, here in Sussex, East Sussex. So it's really helpful. But I think that would be really good as well.
Definitely,
you end up being able to reach people from, you know, and even if people are not on the internet, and some people are not, with a book, that's another platform to help people, so that if they are in their homes by themselves, they have got something they can read, and they can go, oh my goodness, I can hear Sarah's story. So Sarah, so for anybody listening, it's possible for them to join. Definitely go onto the website, which is Warrior Kind. Is it .com or .co.uk?
.co.uk.
Yeah, .co.uk. Just because international people need to know that. And quite often my American clients, they say .co.uk, so I'm going to say it like that for them as well. So it's warriorkind.co.uk instead of .com. I have to say that. And people can just go on and search you up, have a look at you, listen to what you've got to say. I'm sure there's videos about you. This is going on my YouTube channel, which is Susan Kennard. This is going across all my Facebook, all my social media, which is just my name as well. So we're going to share this everywhere, so that people like you and I that have had experiences that have floored them in that moment, actually what an incredible joy comes from it. So from deep sadness, you can really, really expand your consciousness and realize that you're here to serve in such a different way. And the thing is, Sarah, is like, we don't know in that moment, do we? Mine was when I was 27. You know, I'm 50 now, and I was 27, so we didn't know in that moment what was going to happen and how it led you to be who you are. But it's a significant moment in life, and I think there'll be a lot of people listening that will say, oh my goodness, yes, I had a significant moment, whether they call it a spiritual awakening or whether they call it a turning point, and it's led them, you know, to create something or develop a charity or help other people, and they don't really know, oh my goodness, and they've put two and two together now and realized that it was that moment, that conversation they had with someone, that led them to say, I need to be of service. So thank you so much for joining me on the Spiritual Awakener today. I know that, I mean, all I want to say is wow, because I know that this conversation is going to help so many more people. And please, thank you for joining us today on the Spiritual Awakener. Thanks for listening in. Please do share this podcast with anybody. find it. And if you're not listening on iTunes or any other podcast, you're probably watching this on YouTube or you're watching it somewhere else. So please share it, because the more people that can understand that they're not alone with their turning point, they're not alone with their spiritual awakening, the better the world is going to be. Find me on susankennard.co.uk, and Sarah, you can find her on Sarah?
warriorkind.co.uk.
Warrior Kind.
And on Facebook, we're Warrior Kind Women or Warrior Kind Men.
Yeah, so Warrior Kind Women, Warrior Kind Men. So whether you're in your divine masculine or your divine feminine, there is a place for you to be. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
and see you on the next episode of The Spiritual Awakener.